Childhood. We painted in pastels, right? Innocence, laughter. A time before the world gets complicated. But history doesn't always use pastels. Sometimes it dips its brush in the darkest ink imaginable. And it tells stories. Stories about children that make you question everything. Today, we're going there, into those shadows. We're looking at children, some barely out of toddlerhood, others on the cusp of adulthood, whose names are etched in history for acts of profound darkness, acts of shocking violence, of chilling calculation. But this isn't about gawking at the darkness. It's about asking, how? How does a young mind arrive at such a place? What internal tempests, psychological, environmental, biological, brew such devastation? And here's the real heart of it, the question I promise we'll wrestle with. Can looking unflinchingly at these extremes teach us anything about recognizing the subtle tremors before the earthquake hits? Can we learn to see the warning signs flicker? Stick with me. Let's be real, slapping the label evil on a child? It's easy, too easy. It lets us off the hook. The reality is a tangled knot. Profound trauma, echoing neglect, the insidious bloom of mental illness, crushing circumstances. And yes, sometimes, perhaps, a wiring that struggles profoundly with empathy. Our journey isn't to excuse, but to illuminate the psychological landscape, always holding on to the context of their time, their world. Where do you start? Perhaps with a case that screams the devastating impact of early trauma. Mary Bell, England, 1968. Aged between 10 and 11, she killed 2 small boys. The acts themselves, chilling. Strangulation, mutilation, notes left to taunt. But then you read Gita Sereni's Cries Unheard, interviews with Bell herself, and the picture shifts. A childhood allegedly steeped in horrific abuse, a betrayal so profound by her own mother. Psychologically, we see the ghosts of severe attachment wounds, perhaps dissociation, the mind splitting itself to survive the unbearable, and maybe the chilling dawn of profound empathy deficits, warped further by that toxic environment. Even the court saw it, didn't they? Manslaughter, diminished responsibility, a flicker of acknowledgement that her mind was a battleground. Now, step back further. 1870s, Boston. Jesse Pomeroy, the boy fiend. What's terrifying here isn't just the murders at 14, it's the prologue, the calculated sadism before that, starting around age 12, torturing other children. This wasn't fleeting rage. It suggests a developmental path toward cruelty. Psychologically, it resonates with modern concepts of early-onset conduct disorder, loaded with those callous, unemotional traits. Early markers, perhaps, for what we now term psychopathy. Imagine the 1870s grappling with this. It forces that eternal, uncomfortable question: nature, nurture, or the devastating dance between them. But darkness doesn't always act alone. Sometimes it finds an echo. Jon Venables and Robert Thompson, 1993, England, both just 10 years old. The abduction, the torture, the murder of 2-year-old James Bulger. The sheer horror amplified by their youth, by their partnership. It forces us to look at group dynamics. A leader, a follower. Did they create a bubble where empathy suffocated? Psychologists talk about peer contagion, how destructive impulses can ignite in a group. And the backdrop? Reports of instability, exposure to violence, potent kindling, according to studies on adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, potentially scorching away moral development. Sometimes the distortion isn't shared, but deeply internal, almost meticulous. Graham Young, 1960s England, the teacup poisoner. Starting at 14, his wasn't random violence. It was poisons, a pathological obsession. He experimented coldly on his own family, killing his stepmother. Then, released, he killed again. That persistence, that chilling detachment, it screams enduring psychopathic traits. Not passion, but a calculated, almost scientific application of lethal knowledge. And sometimes, the lines blur irrevocably with mental illness. Kip Kinkel, Oregon, 1998, 15 years old, murders his parents, attacks his school. Evaluations later revealed a mind potentially besieged by psychosis, paranoid delusions, voices, perhaps emerging schizophrenia, a specter that often haunts late adolescence. His story is a devastating flare, illuminating the potential catastrophe when serious mental illness goes untreated, especially tangled with fear, isolation, and chillingly easy access to weapons. Consider a different kind of altered reality. Pauline Parker and Juliet Hulme, New Zealand, 1954, 16 and 15. Their murder of Pauline's mother stemmed from a threat to their intensely interwoven fantasy world, a potent example of a possible folie à deux in adolescence, where their shared inner life became more real, more vital than anything outside it. The murder was planned, a defense against the perceived agony of separation, a terrifying glimpse into how adolescent intensity, escapism, and underlying vulnerabilities can twist into violence. And then, the motivations that leave you coldest. Alyssa Bustamante, 2009, 15, stated in her diary she wanted to know what killing felt like before murdering her 9-year-old neighbor. That points towards thrill-seeking, a profound, morbid curiosity, often flagged in discussions of callous, unemotional traits. And Michael Hernandez, 2004, 14, murdered his best friend. Why? He reportedly aspired to be a serial killer. That premeditation, that idolization of violence, it moves beyond impulse into something deeply pathological, something identity-forming. Harrowing stories, difficult histories, trauma, psychopathy, psychosis, obsession, toxic pairs, distorted realities. We've seen the devastating outcomes. But what about that promise? What can we learn from these extreme tragic narratives? How do we translate this grim understanding into something useful, preventative? Okay, let's connect the dots. Based on these historical echoes and modern psychological insights, what are the potential patterns? And I stress patterns, not isolated incidents, and never a substitute for professional assessment. That should make us pause, pay closer attention. We should look for a deep, pervasive empathy deficit, that consistent inability to grasp or care about others' feelings, that chilling callousness like we saw with Pomeroy or Young, repeated cruelty, especially towards animals or the vulnerable, that goes far beyond typical childhood behavior and seems driven by pleasure or power, is another sign. We must watch for an obsessive fixation on violence, a dominating preoccupation with weapons, death, harm, or fire setting. Severe escalating antisocial acts like chronic lying, theft, aggression, rule-breaking, and a profound lack of remorse, well beyond age norms, are red flags. In teens especially, extreme withdrawal combined with odd beliefs or paranoia might signal emerging psychosis, as possibly seen with Kinkel. Overly intense, exclusive relationships with shared disturbing fantasies, where the pair seems detached from external reality like Parker and Hulme, warrant concern. Directly voicing intent or a morbid fascination with harming or killing, like Bustamante or Hernandez, must be taken seriously. And finally, while trauma itself doesn't predetermine violence, severe trauma or neglect combined with significant aggressive behavior is a critical risk factor, as Mary Bell's story might suggest. Recognizing these patterns is step one, but recognition without action is meaningless. So, how do we try to intervene? How do we build resilience? The signposts point here. We need early targeted help, addressing trauma, neglect, severe behavior issues early with effective therapy. Programs like parent-child interaction therapy or multisystemic therapy show promise. Accessible mental health care is non-negotiable. We need quality screening and affordable services for young people. And critically, we must reduce the stigma so families feel safe seeking help for conditions like conduct disorder or early psychosis. Nurturing protective environments is key, strengthening families and communities through support services, creating safe schools and positive social outlets, and actively teaching social-emotional learning like empathy and impulse control from a young age. We must listen seriously and act appropriately, validating a child's feelings, even difficult ones like anger, while firmly addressing harmful actions and seeking professional guidance. and responsible environments matter. Limiting exposure to gratuitous violence and ensuring responsible oversight regarding means of harm. These children, they represent the harrowing edges of human experience. Cautionary tales, yes, tragedies. But they force us to look deeper, to understand the complex interplay of psychology, environment, and biology. Understanding these fault lines, trauma's deep echoes, psychopathy's void, psychosis's distortions, environment's power, isn't about finding easy answers or excuses. It's about gaining crucial insight. It's about acknowledging that the capacity for empathy, or its terrifying absence, often develops or fails to develop much earlier than we comfortably admit. And maybe that's the ultimate lesson. Recognizing these dynamics, even in their most extreme historical forms, sharpens our vision for the present. For spotting manipulation, empathy gaps, distorted narratives, not just in history books, but in our daily lives, in relationships, leadership, even online interactions. By confronting these difficult truths, perhaps we become better equipped to foster the empathy, the connection, the mental well-being that builds a safer future. It starts with understanding. Thank you for exploring this difficult but important territory with me. Let's choose understanding, vigilance, and intervention.